Welcome to Athletes to Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey. I'm Rob Finkelstein, founder and CEO of Alumni Direct, and we've set out to create a platform to help people to network and connect through their affinity relationships, whether it be colleges, whether it be business alumni associations, Greek organizations, or athletes. We try to cater to them to help them out. And we've created this show to teach and inspire athletes that there is life after sports. And I'm really excited today to have Sivonnia DeBarros on there. It's funny because we went through this before and I ended up doing it with the name, but anyway, welcome to the show. So
Thank you, Rob.
you're welcome.
I'm
And
sorry, trying to find the mute
that's
button.
that's okay. So she is a former college athlete. She was a track runner in both high school and college, a sprinter. And now she goes by the protector of athletes, which is awesome. And we'll talk a lot about that during the show. And she's an attorney. So everything going good? How's the day good today? You doing good?
Everything's going good today. It's been massively productive, so I don't have anything to complain about.
That is great. So the first question is always an easy one. Tell me a little bit about growing up playing sports and kind of what you did and how it shaped you.
Yeah, I kind of talked about that a lot with different people in different ways. Because I didn't really recognize how sports was shaping me until I was old enough to kind of reflect back about it. But when I grew up, or as I was growing up, my mom put us in everything. So I played softball, soccer, basketball one year. Then I begged my mom. I was like, I'm not playing this. When I ended up making a shot, like I actually made the shot in the basket, and turns out it was the wrong team because they had the
Oops.
same shot. I was like, okay, this is not for me, clearly. All right. And it was a super embarrassing moment. So I begged my mom not to play basketball anymore. Passed that torch off to my little sister, who that was her sport. What else have I played? I remember wanting to play tennis, but where I grew up, there was literally no tennis teams. My mom and I would go down to the park and we would play tennis and racquetball a lot. Like I was so good. But I didn't have a team to play that on. And track, I was able to do that a little bit as a younger kid, but especially once I got to high school, that was definitely my sport. Even when I played softball, like you could see the quickness, in how fast I would get to bases. So I knew, I was like, okay, I love running. I absolutely love running. But so that's kind of what I've done as a child growing up. One of the experiences I had playing soccer, this was, what do you call it when you're little kids playing Pop
Yeah.
Warner soccer. And in my town, I was the only female on the team, and I was the only Black body. So the only African American on the team and the only girl. I was fast. When I think back on them, like, those kids couldn't even keep up with me. But there was such a lack of representation that I felt uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I realized later in life that much of my world would look the way my soccer team did,
Yeah.
you know? And so fast forward, growing up and going through different levels of education, there have been many times that I've been the only African American person in the classroom, and sometimes even the only or one or two females in a room. But it's taught me valuable lessons of being able to show up confidently and powerfully is who you are, right? And not allowing the, I guess, the uncomfortableness or the lack of representation put you in a position where you feel like you don't have a voice, right? Not allowing it to be so intimidating where you can't get what you need. Because had I stayed on that team as a child, I don't know what else I probably could have taken along my journey with me.
Right.
But that was one of the more pivotal moments of my childhood in sports that I recall having. But I also love the fact that through sport, I met amazing coaches who have had a lot to do with who I am. I do feel like they are an extension of
Yeah.
our village, of our family, and those who gave me a safe space
Yeah.
to not just be myself, but to really, ask some questions or start a dialogue about something and not feel like I was going to be in trouble for it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I did a lot of coaching myself in youth sports. I mean, I started with my son with soccer and basketball, but ultimately baseball was our sport. But it always resonated with me. I'll never forget. There was one coach. He was one of the older coaches, so almost kind of like a mentor, I guess, because I was young one starting out, and he talked about how years later going to the weddings of some of these kids and all that, and just that they remembered. And like even now, I'll talk to my son, and he's 27, and we'll talk about playing, and a lot of the memories that they have weren't actually of the games. It was everything that they did afterwards. The going to the different events and the tournaments and going out afterwards to eat dinner and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, coaching definitely. Yeah, there were some coaches that impacted me as well. So did you have any kind of dreams of being a professional athlete when you were growing up?
I did. Marion Jones was my idol until let's not even talk about it. But anyway,
She was an Olympian, right?
she was an
Yeah.
Olympian.
Okay.
Yes, yes. But yeah, I dreamed of running track at the Olympic level. But I also dreamed of being a lawyer. So, if my memory serves me correctly, being a lawyer was the first thing that I've ever uttered to my mom that I wanted to be. So that dream was never going away. Everything seemed to always be the extra of what I know I can do, what I'm capable of doing. Um, a little bit of what I want to do,
Right.
right? But sporting in the physical sense, in the athletic sense for my entire life, at one point, yes, being an Olympic athlete was definitely on that list. But I always had other grandiose ideas, especially of owning my own enterprise, different things. So I knew, I mean, even if you look at the time span of Olympic athletes,
Mm.
right? You get the opportunity to compete at such a high level
Right.
once every 4 years. What else can you do to maximize that time when you get there? Because at some point, just like football players, baseball players, basketball, like you're gonna have to retire. But for
Right.
Olympic athletes, I think that retirement is a little bit sooner.
Yes, I
So
agree.
yeah, so
And
you
it's
still
the,
need something
the
else.
thing too is yeah, and I think it was more like for high school, but runners, especially distance runners, didn't. I think people kind of looked at it like, okay, is that really a sport? I mean, it
Oh
is
my God.
obviously. Like sprinters have like there's a little more prestige to sprinters, I think, than distance
I
runners.
could not do distance, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and I think it's changed over time. But anyway, yeah, I always this is the part I always say every show. I'm like, yeah, I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player. Unfortunately, talent wasn't there, and this is what I said.
Yeah.
And here I am on the show. But so now, fast forwarding to college a little bit, and did one of the things that at Alumni Direct, it's we're talking about alumni having an impact on like current students. So
Hmm.
in your journey at University of South Florida, were the alumni athletes involved at all, like kind of coming back and helping or shaping out the current athletes?
I don't recall that at all. I do recall us having events where, like specifically for the track and field athletes, where other elite athletes would come in and talk to us. I also remember having the opportunity, I still got the tickets over here somewhere, had the opportunity to see Maya Angelou speak in person. That was life-changing for me. Um, but I don't remember any alumni coming to the school to talk to us. Now, very well, there probably could have
Right.
been, but I don't remember that at all.
And I think it's different in different sports too. But a lot of what I hear is kind of what, like you said, like the meets, like even in football or baseball. I mean, like former alumni might come back and they got a golf tournament or something like that. But one of the things that we talk about with athletes is just helping
Mhm.
them to network and connect, and having that place where they can go. And I think it's alumni, not only for athletes but just in general, could definitely help to
Right.
shape not only the current students but other alumni athletes, and whether it's helping them get jobs or helping them with your businesses, mentoring, whatever it might be.
Mhm.
When you're, also, I guess the other thing we talk about is, um, were there classes, or did you see anything from the school? And things change
Mhm.
based on years and all that, but did you
Mhm.
see anything from the school where they helped to prepare athletes for life after sports? I mean, were there classes or people that work with the athletes there?
I think I'm a different case study than most athletes because, and this, I'm saying this to answer your question, because since always had, in my opinion, a clear sense of self, at least during whatever period of time I was in, and I knew what I wanted to do, I knew that the athletic facility provided resources to us, and I would make myself available to go and get those resources, right? So if there were office hours, I would make myself available to my AD. We had a beautiful, I don't even know what it looked like now, but back then our study room was amazing. And it would literally be like five of us in there. And it was always the lesser sports, if you will, track,
Right.
softball, different, stuff that people didn't really care about, but we were always in there doing our thing. And another thing about me too is I was a political science major. So that's a little more difficult than what more mainstream sports athletes are doing. They're not necessarily taking on that type of a degree, especially not back then. People are being encouraged now to stick with
Sure.
what your guts are, stick with what you want, but back then they weren't. I don't think that they were.
Right.
So to try and succinctly answer that question, I honestly don't know if there was
Right.
anything else that was definitively only available for life after sports for student athletes.
Yeah, and obviously, like you said, based on the time when you went to school, obviously, when I went to school, it's a lot longer ago. They didn't necessarily have that, but I think it's, times are changing a little bit, and people seeing. I mean, we've talked a little bit offline, and I know that uh, there's a real issue with athletes transitioning out of sports. Whether it be mental health issues or financial literacy and all that. So, one of the things that we're talking about doing is, again, like with the platform, is just trying to provide various resources so these athletes have that and can utilize that. So, one of the big things, and I know this is something that's big with you, and I was fortunate enough to be involved in watching your NIL combine, name, image, likeness. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts, which I'm sure you have a lot of, but kind of walk us through the current landscape of NIL and some of the thoughts and things that you think can be done better, or to that nature.
And I'm sorry for the last part of your question, some things that I could have done better or that
No,
other
and in fact,
college.
sorry for asking a two-part question. So if you watch some of my other shows, I do that sometimes. I'm not trying to trip up the guests. So we'll just, I guess the bottom line is, tell me about your thoughts on NIL. We'll call it that way.
Yeah, no, I love the fact that college athletes now can monetize their own celebrity. It's something that should have been done a long time ago, and it's not a new concept. So I tell people this all the time, like as business owners, as creatives, if you're creating a $1 million brand, right? We have name, image, and likeness, and there are rules on the books, depending on what state you're in, that help you protect your name, image, and likeness. There are federal rules already available that help you protect your name, image, and likeness. They are called trademark, copyright, and sometimes patent. Okay. Sometimes contract law. So there are things that are already out there, mechanisms that have been put in place for individuals, just like student athletes who have a celebrity, who has technically a household name, right? Because when you go on Thursday or Friday and you're watching college ball, people know these kids' names. They know their jersey numbers. You know what I mean? So
Right.
it's something that was overdue. And I'm happy that they have the ability to do this now because institutions as well as the NCAA are all benefiting off the names and
Right.
talents
Oh, for
of
sure.
these young kids. And there's no reason why they shouldn't have to benefit either, right?
Right.
We're necessarily, or they are necessarily sacrificing a lot just to play for their school, albeit no one asked them to come there and play, right?
Right.
But you do sacrifice a lot. And when you are in those sports that traditionally generate the majority of the revenue for your university, a lot is put on your shoulders as a student athlete to perform,
Right.
right? And that's where they're getting those ticket sales from. So, in my opinion, this is probably why I'm having a hard time going into them schools. But I don't feel like the school is gonna lose any money just by the student athlete being
Yeah.
able to monetize their name, image, and likeness.
Right. And I think you're in a unique position, being an attorney and working with them to kind of help guide them. Because I guess, I've talked to some athletes, former professional players that, weren't fortunate enough to have the NIL when they were playing and they like it. But like one guy said, a former NFL guy said, I think it's great. However, his concern is that some of these athletes, all of a sudden they're making this, let's say, windfall of money, and they don't understand, like, hey, you got to pay taxes. And I say this too. It's not just, obviously it's not just athletes. It's, it could be any young people that all of a sudden start making money just not knowing what to do with it. So with your firm, when you're working now with some of these athletes, is that part of where you might help? I mean, it's like legal, financial type thing.
Not necessarily financial. I do talk about it from a perspective as, in the way I serve my clients, because it's a necessary component to understand, what you value your brand, whether that's your name or some type of product that you've created to go along with that. But to answer your question, yes, I do know that a lot of not just even student athletes, but people in general, business
Right.
athletes included,
Sure.
professional, retired, whatever, tend to look at the possibility of something and go, dive head first without really thinking about the construct of what can be or what should be or what could be the long-term impact of this thing. And I've talked about recently or previously, for example, about social media, because that is the most popular way that college athletes are monetizing their name, image, and likeness. But without having the proper support and or education around what you can do, I do believe that they're leaving money on the table.
Okay.
Because if you're negotiating one deal to post, something for a brand, and you've never talked about how long that post has to be up, and this brand is consistently creating revenue from the one thing that you post, you might be leaving money on the table.
Right.
Okay.
Sure.
And they have consistent and repeated access to use your NIL to sell whatever this product may be. So just to me, that's simple,
Right.
understanding those things. But what I'm recognizing is that a lot of people do not recognize that. They're not even recognizing the importance of setting a time frame on their deal. Like, how long do I have to do a particular thing for
Yeah.
this brand? Because if I decide I don't like you, or if I want to work for a competing brand that I
Right.
have more connection with, I don't want to be tied into this contract and then open myself up to potential liability. Liability being damages. People get paid for damages through technically money. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. So I am seeing that there's a lot of miseducation, uninformed decisions, and I don't know how to put this nicely, but people who are just like ignoring the fact that you need something and just won't go and do it. You won't go get the education. You won't talk to the people
Right.
you need to talk to. And unfortunately, the majority of folks that come to my firm anyway are coming to me once something has happened. That's why
Yeah.
I've been trying to get on the front
Front end of
to really
educating.
proactively, yeah, help
Yeah.
people to recognize these things.
What's the how does it work with agents? Because I guess in the past, as a college athlete, you couldn't have an agent, right? Yeah, because
Right.
then you're like professional. So with NIL, does that affect it? Like, can I, as a college athlete, have an agent that's managing the NIL, or is that an NCAA violation?
No, that's not an NCAA violation, and it depends on your state. But most of the states that I read, which is technically all of them that have NIL or proposed NIL, They're saying that you can have agents, and here in Illinois, they recently amended a particular provision around agents. Don't quote me. I believe I'm going off memory now,
Right.
but I think they kind of made that a little more open around agents, because your agent can kind of be really anyone that you hire to go and source a deal or manage a deal for you.
Sure.
But no, it wouldn't be considered a violation of NCAA, which makes sense because as an entrepreneur, you should have the forthright
Right.
to retain any representation that you deem fit to either source, manage, or protect your deal.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
that makes sense. So going on, one of the things we talk about a lot is like networking, connecting. And I've heard different things, and I'll give you like a take of like some of these agents I've talked to that they feel like a lot of athletes they don't network and connect when they really should, which is when they're playing.
very
Kind of give
true.
me your thoughts on what you've seen. I mean, as a former, as an athlete, and
Yeah,
then other athletes you deal with. What are your thoughts on that?
that's a very valid point. Um, and I think the biggest issue is that they don't know how to network. I didn't know how to network. And I'm just gonna be honest and say I don't think I really knew how to network until like 2019. That's like a few years ago. Oh gosh, I might give myself a little bit of leeway. Okay, I've been doing a little better than that, but
Yeah.
yeah, but I really do think that it's just a matter of taking the intimidation out of it
Right.
and taking the stereotype that it has to take so long out of it. I mean, some relationships, yeah, they might take time to cultivate, but I do know that when you meet someone and you just click, like that synergy is there,
Yeah.
that relationship it is what it is,
Right.
right? It's not going
Absolutely.
to be any extra effort to check in on somebody, communicate with somebody, go and have, a coffee or whatever. So some relationship, and this is another reason why athletes should be willing to get out there, meet people, and network, because they're going to be individuals that their souls just instantly connect with it. They may not have known, wow, I have a lot in common with this person.
Yeah.
But yeah, they don't know how. Um, and I also think that for a lot of them, the narrative around their particular sport is pushed more than, building relationships outside of that. But the only, I guess, you know, bad thing about it, the con about that is if you're only pushing the narrative around the sport and the people around your sport, you kind of also will attract people who just want to get something out of you.
Yeah. No, and I know,
Yeah.
especially with athletes, it's the first sense is that they just want something from you, like
Yeah.
other people. I think one of the things that we've set out to do is we're have created. It's called an athlete community center, and the idea is to have athletes, whether they play baseball, whether they're track, tennis, golf,
Right.
football, whatever, but a place where college and professional athletes and beyond can go into this community center, work together, network. I mean,
Right.
I think a lot of times I say with networking, connecting, if you weren't in an Ivy League school, you weren't in a fraternity or sorority, sometimes athletes or you weren't good at it. Most people don't know how to network and connect. And that's
That's
something that
true.
and we want to help, foster that and teach people,
Yeah.
kind of take them under our arms and say, it's not about, hey, how can you help me? It's like, how can I
Right.
help you? And
Right.
then if you develop that
That relationship.
relationship, it's going to
Yeah.
work. So
Yeah.
once you kind of got done with college, and I know we talked a little bit about for you, fortunately, the transition to sport wasn't as difficult because you kind of knew what you wanted to do. But in dealing with other athletes that you deal with or just friends, and kind of give advice on how to take that journey from once you're done, that there are great things that you could do, whether it's in the business world or anywhere else.
Yeah. Well, depending on wherever you are in your journey of transitioning, you have to keep top of mind that sense of self is number one. It's very important to know who you are, and it's also important to know what you want outside of everybody else. Look, even if you've done something for hold on one It's my kid.
No worries, no worries.
Sorry about
We
that.
all have
Yeah.
them.
So even if you've done a particular thing for 10 years or more, let me say it like this. There are people who connect their identity to the thing that they do. There are people in this country and in this world, if they lose their job, they will lose their mind
Yeah,
because their job has become who they are. And it's unfortunate because they have never been able to create an outward and inner success around who they are as people and about what they want. And I think there's so many different things that kind of go into that too. Like, are you trying to please people? Do you think that, society has laid this framework for you, so you have to follow it to get to this particular thing, and then you never even get there, but you spend all this time doing it, right?
yeah,
So you got to know who you are. Even if you spent umpteenth years doing a thing, is that really what life is supposed to be about?
right,
To
right.
know who you are.
Yeah, and it's
Mhm.
interesting you say that too, because a couple people I talked to, it's almost like this sport, kind of like what you're talking about, the sport defined them. So, I was a former, let's say I'm a former Major League Baseball player.
Mhm.
I'm a baseball player. Well, no, well, you're the person, and I
Correct.
guess that's that, kind of like what you're talking about there. The mindset is just
Yeah.
not to be like that.
Yeah, yeah. No, you definitely you got to check your mindset at every level of where you are and of what you're doing, because you need to also make sure that you are aligned. And I think that would be my second tip. So once, know thyself. To make sure that the next phase of where you're trying to go to is in alignment with who you've determined yourself to be. And I think that just by the sheer measure of nature, right? A lot of things will fall off just by us knowing who we are and whether a particular thing aligns with us. And I think you can find your alignment keys in determining your value system. Like, what are the things that I am not going to do because I don't feel like it speaks to me as a person? You can't even get there to define that until you know you.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah. So I think that would be it for me. That will, really help people to transition. And that's not even just out of college. Like, if you have to
Right.
transition from career to career, if you need to transition from a different state, like we live in a state, we don't have any family here.
Yeah,
That can be a difficult thing sometimes,
very much so.
especially now that we have a kid,
Yeah,
you know? So there's always going to be a point of transitioning in your life. But if you've centered yourself and you've given yourself something to work with and work from, it will take the sting out of the transition for you. It won't be
yeah.
so intimidating.
No, that's great advice. I mean, it's we've talked about it offline a little bit. Just there's just so many issues out there now in this whole, whether it's mental health issues or financial
Yeah,
literacy, and yeah, I think it's blood, sweat, and tears. I mean, a lot of athletes,
it is.
even it's all different sports, but they all have something in common: that drive, that determination,
Yeah,
which is, when we talk about athletes, entrepreneurs,
yeah,
it's a the big thing, to be able
yeah.
to do that. So, give me now. I call it kind of like the corporate commercial, but talk a little more about some of the things that you're doing. Whether it's through NIL or just the other things you're doing with your firm, and kind of tell people how they can find you too. But first off, just kind of walk me through some of the things you're doing.
Yeah, well, since we're dealing with the Alumni Direct, I would try to keep the brand aligned.
Okay.
So you guys can connect with me and follow me through Athletes Making Moves. If you end up needing legal services, then there will be a way that you can find that brand later. That's with my law firm, DeBarros Law Firm. But so one of the things that I'm doing to educate athletes specifically is through my podcast, What Are You Sporting About, as well as the Athletes Making Moves brand. So as you know, we just recently wrapped up the first annual NIL Combine that came on the heels of the book launch the year prior. So we are going to be ramping up for early planning of NIL Combine 2023, and I'm super excited about this. I was just amazed at the feedback from this year, and it was all virtual. One student athlete immediately found me on IG and messaged me, and she was like, this was so amazing. I've attended
Yeah,
long conferences in person and online, and I've never received this type of transformation. I mean, the testimonial is amazing. So I'm always trying to educate athletes and those who are around them, because I recognize that we get a lot of our advice from the people who are closest to us.
sure.
So it's necessary for them to get the same education that you are as an athlete. But I want to empower them not just to do a thing because now you can do it, but understand all that comes along with it. When you understand everything, you empower yourself to really set a foundation that could be multi-generational, right? It could really be
Yeah.
something amazing, and you can put yourself in the driver's seat to avoid the stereotypes and the outcomes of most professional athletes who have not been able to get this, in a sense, crash course
Right.
before they are introduced at the pro level. So, hey, you get in where you fit in, but also make sure that you're taking ownership too of what you're supposed to do as an individual. And so that's what I do, even as the protector of athletes. In the same way I talk to my athletes is the same way I talk to my $1 million brand clients. Everybody's getting that mindset conversation because it's some of the same issues. You can't scale a business to multi six figures, and you definitely can't scale a brand to seven figures if you are not going to do the work. I can tell you everything. I can give you all the strategy. I can tell you how to protect it. But if you're not going to do the work, all of it is for naught.
I'm
So,
signing up.
yeah.
And actually, I will validate the conference she was talking about was awesome, and it was very fast moving. It was great. So a lot of great information there. And what's this? So protector of athletes. Tell me just quickly about that. Where did that come from?
For some reason, I just started calling myself the protector. I think it was sometime after I wrote What Are You Sporting About and or launched that podcast. But I kept saying, like, I want to help protect athletes. And then at some point I said, you know what? I am the protector of athletes. I'm giving people information that is substantially rooted in law a lot of the time, because that's where my passion lies,
Sure.
right? So that's where I teach from. It's from my legal mind. Um, and so it just naturally flowed. The protector of athletes. You are better protected when you know what you're doing, you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely. And what's the premise of the podcast? Anything in particular that you talk about, or
It started off, so What Are You Sporting About started off as a book, almost kind of a message to professional and retired athletes, to help them understand that they were once a dreamer who was in control of where they wanted their future to go. And it helps them kind of determine how they got off track. We introduced the issue around trauma. We introduce the issue of, the entourage effect, and how that's hurting them, and taking a clear and hard stance to communicate with the people that they love around the decision making of their pockets, right? Why is this a good or not good situation? And how
right,
does it impact all of us in the long run? And so, essentially what I want that book to do is help them to recognize what were they sporting about in the beginning when they were just a kid and it was a
right,
dream to play.
yeah.
What was the end goal of that? Because it doesn't make sense for you to get to the end of this finish line, at the time your sport ends, for you to be completely torn and tattered, and your dream has gone down with it.
No, that
Yeah.
it sounds like a great show, and I love podcasts, so I definitely want to add that to my list of just when I'm out walking and running, I'm always looking for good content, and it's amazing too because when I listen to some of these shows, I'm like, oh, that person would be great for my show, because I just say, and in fact, I'm not sure if you did a show on Thrive on Sports, I might have heard that too, but
On which one?
Thrive on Sports with Taj, were you
Oh,
on?
hold on, wait. I did do, gosh, I totally forgot about that. I
Yes.
did do an app with Taj.
Okay,
Yeah.
and I thought so. Taj is a mutual friend of ours, and he's got a great podcast as well.
He
And
does.
he was one of our guests on our show too. So, thank you again. It was great. We're going to put all that stuff in the show notes. You can find Alumni Direct at alumnidirect.com. You can find us on LinkedIn and Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all those. And, follow us and follow the show too, because I think this is something that we really want to make an impact in helping athletes. So thank you so much, and have a wonderful evening.
You too, Robin. Thank